Hello again, everyone. So we've reviewed string interpolation and property binding, and these two communication methods are interacting from TypeScript to template. However, as I'm sure you remember me mentioning before, sometimes this interaction can be from user to class. So here's where event binding comes in. Now, in the last lesson, we created a button and we made it true or false with property binding. So in this lesson, I want to show you the interaction from template to class by clicking this button. So we're going to talk about event binding. So let's say that I want to edit a little bit of what we did last lesson. Comment here for now. And again, I want to continue with this button. So I'll show you a small example to understand event binding a little deeper. Then we'll continue with some arrangements to our project. So now when I press this button, I want to print hello on the console first, okay? So for this, I am creating a string variable. I'm using it in the method that I'm going to create here. Cool. So now that that's set up, it's time to learn how to use event binding. So now we'll write the name of the event in parentheses where we define the button in the HTML file. So I'm typing click here. Then I'll put equal, and between quotation marks, we call the method. So here we have made use of event binding. In fact, when you look at it this way, it looks like using property binding, doesn't it? So we use square brackets for property binding and parentheses for event binding. Okay, so now it's time to examine in the browser what we've just done. So I'll open up a console, and I haven't pressed the button yet. So I don't see the word hello, right? Now I'll press a button, and the console now says hello. And yep, as you can see here, we communicated by pressing a button on the template. Cool. So that is a pretty strong example of that communication. So now we've assumed that we created this button to add a product, right? So I want to edit the method and the article here accordingly. And then I will use this article with string interpolation for status tracking. Look at this. So when I look in the browser, I don't see the string interpolation that I just created. But now I can see, as you see, when I press the button, because we have interacted with this button just by pressing. Okay, so now there's something else that we need to know about this event binding business. So to illustrate, I'll create an input field in the HTML file, and here we will allow the user to enter the product name, and we'll trigger the update method, and we will create by listening to the input event. So now let's do these things in practice and make it clear. So first I'll create a label here, and then an input field, which type is text, and I'll also enter form and control as class. So now let's look at what will be the response when the value is entered in this input field. That is when the event occurs. So I'll open parenthesis for this, and I'll write input, and then the method we will prepare in the TypeScript file, and the parameter that it's going to take. Of course, these are between quotation marks. Now, here we'll define the parameter with $ and event. So here, $event is important that it conveys information about the event, and we can use it in the template when using event binding. So this information can include data values such as an event object string or number named, $event. So $event will simply be the data emitted with that event. So input and click are default events provided by the DOM that you can say and send some data when triggered. Then the click event gives us an object holding, for example, the coordinates that we clicked. And the input event also gives us some data, some information about the event. We can now capture this data with $event, which is passed as a parameter to the method. All right? Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so now it's time to prepare our method in TypeScript. We'll write our method, and it'll take a variable of type as any parameter. And we'll print this on the console to keep track of what it is that we're doing. So to keep track of our transactions, examining the console will be, well, that's what it's there for, right? So it's convenient for us. Now we can see what we do in the browser. So sure enough, there have been changes, and I wrote something in this input, and when I look at the console, I'll expect to see this value. So now I'll open up the console, and I'll see a long string of information. Actually, there are as many triggers here as the letter we wrote. So I'm going to scroll down a bit, and here I'll look at the target, and here I see the value, the text, and sure enough, we entered text in an input field, and we provided a new trigger every time we hit a letter. So now I want to assign this text in a variable and see it on the template. So for this, I'll define a string variable in the TS file. And I want to use this variable in this method, and this method's parameter is event. Now we should pay attention to writing while using this parameter. Our variable is event.target.value, and this variable is HTML input element. And don't forget to put it in parentheses. So when using it here, we'll first declare element, and then we want to equalize the value. So we should pay attention to this. And now we can see this variable with string interpolation on the template. All right, so you followed all that. Now let's have a look and see what it looks like on the browser. Yep. Okay, so I entered the value in the input field. I can see that right away. And we see the change in the template with the triggering of an input element. All right, so I think that's enough for this particular lesson. And it completes the examination of one-way data binding methods. We learned what happens and how to use these methods. So we're going to talk about two-way binding in the next lesson. So I hope to see you then. Until the next lesson, goodbye for now.